Okay, the training for today. Let's make a journey again, being together. I invite you to continue the journey. I have started the journey before Andy for 2 hours, building a kind of systematic overview of cultural historical theory as a system of concepts. And then if you find in some articles or books or papers you read something like Vygotsky did not create any systematic theory, please don't believe this. Now you see that he did. Okay, the point is just to read his text carefully and you find everything there. I promised to make a journey. I promise that we collectively will find one of the concepts from Vygotsky, which is your favorite concept and which you wanted to start the journey from. We will start the journey from the one single concept. We take it as a unit of analysis, so as a living cell, and then we will see how this living cell will grow and we will clarify the relationship with other concepts. We will create a kind of conceptual map and as big as we can in order to identify the proper place of this, your favorite concept, within the whole system. Okay, that's the kind of training. I'm not speaking about training skills. I'm speaking about making a journey together, intellectual journey or conceptually framed journey. And we need a slogan for that. We need a slogan for our journey, the flag. And I would suggest what is known as Nikolai's mantra. And probably you heard about that, Nikolai's mantra. And Nikolai's mantra is becoming quite popular. So Nikolai's mantra is: human minds are historically rooted, socially constructed, and culturally shaped.
Mm.
This is what is known as Nikolai's mantra. Well, and I just got a dissertation from one student from PhD from Sweden, Clara Ozi. Maybe you know her, somebody knows her. And Clara used this mantra as a epigraph for the whole dissertation. Nikolai's mantra. So it's now published, Nikolai's mantra. And my ownership, my copyright is now confirmed. Okay, let's having this mantra in mind. Human minds are historically rooted, socially constructed, and culturally shaped. So now, John, can you please take a leadership and ask people to just to put to the chat which concept you would like us
Well, do you want to give
start?
them the menu?
Menu?
So
No. Up to you. Okay. ZPD. Переживание. ZPD o переживание. Okay. ZPD. Wow. Quite expected. Drama and crisis. Wow. ZPD. Ooh. ZPD. Oh. ZPD. Drama. Okay. And переживание. Wow. There are two concurrent concepts, ZPD and переживание.
yes, they're obviously winning.
Will. I'm sorry. Andy, provocation. You know that will is not a concept. Okay. So, is the voting process closed? No, please. How many participants, by the way? 22. Wow. Why will not a concept? Because will is a higher psychological function. And higher psychological function is a concept. Okay. Concept development. Concept development. Concept development is a process. Okay. The concept of higher psychological function, okay, is a concept. Yes. Okay. Okay. Finished?
Yep, I think we've closed it.
So, as I see from the list, ZPD is probably the most admired concept.
Six of those. Perishvanye is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 for Perishvanye. Concept or concept development or something about concepts is about 3. Then we've got mastery behavior. And
so ZPD leads the list as always. Oh, okay, ZPD, just boom. Okay. I can share my screen. We will build whiteboard, but I'm sorry, I don't know how to use a whiteboard. Please forgive me. I will just use it ordinary PowerPoint presentation. So, sorry. Your concept is ZPD. Dear people who wanted переживание and drama and crisis, they all will be here sooner or later. But we will start from ZPD. Okay. ZPD is a selected concept, selected by the group of very smart and fantastically motivated people. Okay. What is ZPD? Can you give a definition of a ZPD? Zone of Proximal Development. What is ZPD? Is anybody ready? Just to explain by your own words. You don't need the exact words from Vygotsky, because in Vygotsky there is a definition of ZPD, of course. But
Can I give it a try? Oh, sorry.
Okay, good. Applauses. Okay.
Ezra.
Yeah, Judy. You can go first, no worry.
You can do it.
No, you're the first.
Okay, so according to my understanding, the ZPD is the zone that a child or even the adult has to ask more knowledgeable people or person to be able to understand what's happening, and then they can go from their own. So it has to have an external help, then he can do it individually.
Okay.
Just a scaffolding or the push that everybody need to be able to complete the task.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Anybody else wants to add something?
Yeah. For me, the zone of proximal development is where you develop better with the support and
With the support, I'm sorry?
develop with the support or encouragement of another.
Okay, where is the place where you develop better? Okay.
Yeah,
is the support and encouragement of others? Okay.
The zone is the distance between those two that we're talking about.
About what two we are talking about?
What someone can do by with help from someone else and what they can do by themselves.
Yeah. Julie, can you please repeat again? ZPD is what? You said a distance. The distance. Okay. Sorry. We can understand this as a place, as a somewhere, as a territory, as an area. But if we take cultural historical conception of ZPD, the concept of ZPD, first of all, Vygotsky says, and Vygotsky insists, and he repeats in different places this word distance. This ZPD is a distance, but every distance is a distance between something and something, between start and the end. When we run the distance, even marathon, it has starting point and finish. Okay? Distance. The key word is the distance. Okay. Distance between what and what ZPD is. Distance between what and what. What is the starting point? What is the finishing point?
Between the ideal form and present form.
No.
Is it between the actual level of development and the potential level of development?
Bravo! Bravo! Vygotsky says, I'm quoting Vygotsky now. ZPD, Zone of Proximal Development, is a distance between two levels of development of the child. The first is level of actual development. And the level of possible, Vygotsky doesn't say potential, he says possible. Okay, this is a distance. Then, when we say, okay, sorry. I'm sorry, I have to be very exact, right? Because when we are working with concepts, we cannot be vague, like we have to be focused. Okay.
So do I interpret that as meaning it's an empty space?
I don't know, Luis, because you did not extend your interpretation, and you can ask this question to yourself, dear Luis. Distance between actual development and possible development.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, doesn't make sense to you?
Because it's a zone of development.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't make sense because we did not create the whole definition. It's only a part of the definition. Of course, if you only say that it's a distance between, it says nothing. Oh, I'm sorry. It seems to me that somebody disappeared. Oh no. Okay, I wanted to see the faces I love. Brandon, Megan, David. Okay, you're here because my screen is jumping. Okay, now the question: level, level of actual development or actual development level, okay, and possible development level. Okay, but it doesn't say anything. Distance between actual level of actual development. So what does it mean? Actual level of actual development. What is this? What is this? Level of actual development of what? Or level of actual development of whom?
Of the child.
Yes. Okay.
Or psychological function.
Yeah. Don't be so quick, Megan. Child. Vygotsky says that when we are using intellectual tests like IQ, Binet tests, which were very widely used in Russia, in the Soviet Union during Vygotsky's times, Vygotsky is saying that these are great intellectual tests. And do you know what IQ is? Did you try to determine what is IQ? What is your IQ? People who knows his or her IQ? Raise your hand.
I did once upon a time when I was about 10.
Yeah, and it was 250, I know. Okay, so what do you think, if you remember those tests, what level of development they are testing? If I give the child the IQ intellectual tests and then I see the answers.
Actual
Development. Why? Because I give the child the task and the child has to solve the task individually, being alone without any help. If in binary or IQ tasks I give the child some hints, it will be not valid. So no. The researcher should not interrupt the process. Okay. So that's why Vygotsky says by testing children by IQ tests or Zane or Binet, we only can know the child's actual level of development, what the child can do. But then Vygotsky suggests that, okay, but what about the future of the child? By testing what the child can do now, what we are actually testing? We are testing the child's yesterday. We are testing the child's past. We are not testing the child's future. It helps us to understand the child retrospectively. But according to Marxist philosophy, every human has a potential. And this is clearly written by Marx, by the way. And I think Andy agreed with that. Yeah? Okay. Marx said a lot about human potential. And what Vygotsky gives the metaphor of the gardener who is having an orchard garden, trees. And he said that smart gardeners are not only counting the fruit on the tree, they're looking at buds and flowers, because the buds and flowers tomorrow will be fruits. The same way, good teacher or a good pedagogist, I'm looking at David, should find the method of diagnostic method, not only the fruits of development, not only what the child is able, what kind of tasks the child is able to do individually, but the buds of development. This is not an easy task. This needs a great rethinking, reconceptualizing of the process of development. So, the actual level of development, element of the child. And level of possible development of the child. Okay. And what does it mean? Vygotsky continues. He says that at every moment of time, at every age level, every child doesn't have only one level of development, which can be easily identified using standardized intellectual, binary, or IQ tests. The child has at least 2 levels of development. One actual level of development, and the second is the possible level of development. And the task of the teacher is to identify both. The first task to identify the actual level of development of the child. The second task to identify the level of potential development or level of possible development of the child. Task 1, task 2. Why it's so important to identify the level of possible development? Because if I know the level of possible development, I can create my pedagogy in such a way that it will be focused on this level of development. Create the conditions for this and help the child to reach this level, to realize his potential completely. Because if my learning is only based on what child already knows, it's not a good learning. My learning should be focused on what the child is not able to do, but will be able to do tomorrow. Do you understand now how important it is to identify two levels? And then Vygotsky continues, and he continues, and this is very important for us, because this makes a link between ZPD and the subject matter of cultural historical theory. And main concept of cultural historical theory is the concept of higher psychological function. And Vygotsky writes that actual level of development discloses, opens those psychological functions which are already developed. And therefore, because they are developed, the child can solve the tasks because they know how to solve these tasks, and he can do it easily. But these high psychological functions are fruits. They are finished their developmental cycle. They are developed, and the child is using this. But at the same time, because of the law of asynchronicity, at the same time, there are some other high psychological functions which are not yet developed. They are in the process of development. They are at the stage of buds or flowers. And level of possible development is the way to disclose these functions, high psychological functions, which are at the first, how to say, at the bud stage. They are just emerging. They are not completely developed, but they are just, it's like on the tree, the buds are just intending to pick their flowers. Okay. So, you see, it's not just two levels of development of the child. Through these two levels of development of the child, we can measuring this, we can understand which functions of the child are already developed and which are not already developed. So this means that when we are dealing with the child, we have to understand that in every child, there are some functions which are quite well developed. At the same time, there are functions which are not quite well developed because of many reasons, age, so and so on. It never happens in a garden, because when you look in the garden, there is a stage when there are all flowers, then all buds, then all fruits. But the child is very strange tree. At the same time, he has some buds, some fruits, and some flowers at the same time. And they interact even. But I'm not touching that. So, and how the gardener identifies the buds? The gardener identifies the buds very easy. He just come to the tree, looks at the buds and counts the buds. Okay, I have 25 buds in this tree, though, so I expect 25 fruits from this tree because they are the buds. It's easy. They are absorbable. But how we teachers, psychologists can identify the buds of higher psychological function? How? They are not written on the child's face. They are somewhere hidden, somewhere in child's mind. They are within the child. How we can do this? And the next question is, where are the fruits and where are the buds? Are you still with me? Am I too complex? Tell me, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
You are okay. Oh, Luis, if you are okay, everybody then is okay.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I don't want to offend you.
No, that's not being offended. I'm being noticed, and that's good.
We know each other, right? And I will never forget our conversation we had in the city in the hotel, talking how many hours? 3 or 4 or 5?
Yeah, and you owe me a drink.
Yes. No, we drink only coffee. Sorry, you forgot.
Well, you owe me a coffee.
Yes. Okay. So the question is, I want to ask the question, if we speak about ZPD, which is related to the idea, the metaphor of the fruits of development and the buds of development, my question is very practically, where are the fruits? Where are the buds? For the gardener, it's not a question. Gardener says, fruits are on the tree, buds are on the tree. But for us, it's a question. Okay, where are the fruits of development? Are they somewhere inside the child? Are they individual higher psychological functions? Yes or no? Yes, they are individual higher psychological functions. That's why the child is able to solve the intellectual problem, because he knows, he understands the question and he can find the answer. They are already internalized individual higher psychological functions. That's okay. And therefore, we are using Binet tests and IQ tests to measure the level of their intellectual development. Okay, good. And where are the buds?
You're asking me, where are the buds?
Yes, I'm asking everyone. And of course, I'm asking you, Liz, where are the buds?
Yeah. I guess I'm waiting for you to tell me.
Something to do with social interaction?
Absolutely, Valerie. Of course. Because the law, there is a general genetic law, and the concept of social environment as a source of development. The buds of development are not inside the child's mind. The buds of development they are in the system of social interactions of this child with others. They are interpsychological. This is a law that every high psychological function appears on the stage twice. First, it appears between the people as interpsychological category, and then it appears within the child as individual function, as intrapsychological category. And development, as we know from Nikolai's terrible explanation, that development is how the social becomes the individual. If you do remember this, you see, what I want to show you is that the concept of ZPD can be understood properly only being understood through the relations of this concept with other concepts and laws of Vygotsky. we can understand what ZPD really means if we understand the idea of the development as how social becomes the individual, if we understand the idea that social environment is the source of development of every higher psychological function, if we understand the idea that every higher psychological function has three characteristics, and the first characteristic is every higher psychological function is social by its origin. What does it mean? It means that the buds are in child's social interaction. The origins, which is the same as the buds, are in the child's interaction. They are, this is the first time they appear. They appear on the stage twice. Okay, first as a social interaction, second as an individual. Okay, the buds are there. And so the task for the teacher, for the researcher, is not only to identify the actual level of development of the child, the functions which are already developed. We cannot further develop them, but to identify those functions which are in the embryonic stage. And the only way is to look at child's interactions, because they are there. They are even physically observable. And even better, if the teacher creates a social interaction in a specific way. For example, if the teacher just gives the task for the child and see that the child is unable to solve the task individually, and then teacher comes and gives a hint or explains, okay, I can help you how to solve this task. You see, what about do this? So, and when the teacher comes to the child with the task, and when teacher begins to solve the task together with the child, giving an example or showing an example or explaining the logic, supporting in collaboration. And by doing this, the teacher creates a social interaction around this concrete task. And through this social interaction, teacher creates inter-psychological stage of. And then after several tasks like this, what happens? After several tasks of this type, what happens? It happens that the child says, oh, I don't need you anymore. I know how to solve this task. What does it mean? It means that what was on the potential level now becomes child's actual level. It means that the child makes a movement, developmental movement, from what he could do only potentially, now he can do independently, individually. So, zone of proximal development is a diagnostical tool which helps teacher or researcher or pedagogist or whatever to identify two levels of development of higher psychological functions and to focus to support those functions which are only available in an area of interactions where there are the buds. And by producing these interactions, by organizing this interaction, the teacher creates the conditions for the child to internalize these functions, because it's because of law 4. Law number 4 says that this is the law of the transition of functions from outside inward. Okay.
Nikolai.
What? And let me finish. You see, zone of proximal development is not just a single concept. It is the concept which clarifies, which specifies the process of development. And the process of development of high psychological functions is the subject matter of cultural historical theory. So this concept clarifies and directly related to the main idea of Vygotsky as the process of development of higher psychological functions is the process of how the social becomes an individual, how social environment begins to work, begins to act as a real actual source of development, and how child's participation makes the social environment not just the environment, surroundings, it makes it a social situation of development. So ZPD is related to social environment, social situation of development, high psychological functions, and law of the double appearance of any higher psychological functions, and the law of the transition of functions from outside to inward. These 5 aspects of zone of proximal development, if we can understand these 5 aspects of zone of proximal development, it means that we have a sort of deep understanding of ZPD, not just interpretation. I'm not interpreting. What I'm saying to you, I'm saying based on Vygotsky's texts. If you read Vygotsky, you will see that what Nikolai is saying is written there. So, more knowledgeable other. I'm very sorry that more knowledgeable other has nothing to do with ZPD. Because ZPD is not about knowledge. It's not about knowing more or less. It's not about the child gets knowledge. ZPD is about higher psychological functions, in thinking in this case. Thinking, intellectual functions in this particular case, because the tasks are intellectual tasks, and the tasks are opposite to Binet. But intellectual development is not just development of knowledge. It's a big mistake to identify intellect with being knowledgeable, because I might know a lot of things without any understanding of these things. Do you understand what I mean? We know many things we do not understand. We know something about quantum mechanics, right? Are we sure that we have a kind of understanding of quantum mechanics? I'm not asking John because I know John understands. You see? So more knowledgeable other is the term which misleads, because zone of proximal development is not about knowledge. It's about development of higher psychological functions, for example, thinking. But thinking is not about knowing. Thinking is about understanding. If you compare yourself with your computer, it might happen that your computer knows more than you, but it doesn't mean that your computer is much smarter than you. By the way, my smart TV really is much more smarter than me, but that's not the case. So Vygotsky says that zone of proximal development is a distance between level of actual development, which can be identified with the help of tasks the child can solve individually. Good. And the level of possible development, which can be identified with the help of the tasks the child cannot solve individually, but yet can solve in cooperation. And under guidance of, Vygotsky said, более умные товарищи, which is in Russian, smarter peers. which was translated as more competent, but competence is also about knowing, right? Более умный in Russian is just smarter or more intellectually developed. Another mistake in the translation, if you look, if Andy, you remember the translation, is that because he says in cooperation with adults and more competent peers, but it was translated as cooperation with adults or with more competent peers, which I don't know why. Okay, so we are not speaking about more knowledgeable other. We are speaking about somebody whose level of development is higher than the child, and then the child can cooperate. They can solve the tasks together, and then the child begins to understand how to solve this task. It's not about knowing more or less. It's about understanding more or less, using your thinking as your higher psychological function. Then,
Nikolai, before we get off into all the different things the ZPD is not, I think Ishraq had a question. Ishraq.
Hello, Nicola. Sorry for really interrupting.
No. Welcome.
It's not really a question, but because my participants are teachers, not children. And what I'm thinking while you are explaining the concept much clearly and identify the more knowledgeable people is not existing in this domain.
No, they do exist, but ZPD is not about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So if we want to apply this concept on teachers, okay, and we say those teachers was doing more teacher-centered teaching, like traditional one, and they have developed gradually to acquire the discussion formula, or maybe the more student-centered approach. Is this considered a ZPD for teachers, or this is just applicable for children?
What do you think?
I'm confused, but I think yes.
Yes. Why do you think so?
Because their social practice has been changed to something more interacting or interactive than
whose social environment is changed. Teachers' social interaction is changed, or children's social interaction is changed.
Sorry?
Do you mean social interactions changed for teachers? Do you mean teachers and students?
Yeah, when they are interacting with their students has been changed, because where I come from, it is very teacher-centered, and now it's changed. I can't see that, but not that much. You know what I mean? Like we are not able to, we are able to share, but in the end, we are waiting for the teacher decision. To say this is the only correct answer. And we still like, I feel we're doing that. So, and when I came here in Australia, this is, I found it like it's not existing. When I asked my supervisor, is this the only answer? She said, no, go and find something else. See what I mean? There is no like definite thing, but in my country, no, we are waiting for the teacher to give us one solid answer, and we rely on that too much. Even for example, in drama, when we are reading novel, we are waiting for the teacher to tell us how to analyze this text from her own point of view.
I know. You don't need to explain, because I'm from the Soviet Union. When I was a school child, a student in the Soviet times, it was actually the same. Teachers know all the answers, and I have to sit quiet and listen to the teacher and remember everything the teacher says. And this is the only way to be a good student. Okay. In Australia, it doesn't look like this. And by the way, it's a problem because in some cultural backgrounds, people from different cultural backgrounds, they come to Australia, and the parents say to children, please sit quiet, listen to the teacher, don't interrupt, and so be good student. When the boy or girl comes to Australian school, the message is different. Be active, ask questions, show your disagreement, bring your own ideas. So this is what to be a good student. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the inner conflict of these students?
Yeah, and I've been through this.
Yeah. Okay.
I wasn't able to share my ideas because I'm afraid if I any mistake or
Yeah. You see, so and what you are speaking is about you call it teacher-centered, the child-centered learning and interactions, but this is not about zone of proximal development, because zone of proximal development is the distance between two levels. If you want to, if you want to speak seriously about zone of proximal development, which is a distance, you have to explain the distance between what and what it is in your research.
Their past activity and their current activity.
But this is not like this is not the distance. Yeah, but this is not the distance between the activities. This is a distance not between the activities. This is a distance between the two levels, level of actual development and level of potential development. The level of actual development of what? The level of potential development of whom? You have to give the answer to these questions. When you say, I like to use ZPD as my concept to study the child-adult interactions, changing the position from child-centered to teacher-centered or vice versa. Great, fantastic. But please explain the reasons why you are using ZPD. And if ZPD is the distance, tell me the distance between what and what it is in your research. When you say it's the distance between activities, I say, no, it should not be. There is a distance between activities, but it's not about ZPD, because ZPD is the distance between two levels of development, the actual level of development and the potential level of development.
Not their past and what
No, it's, if you like, it's the distance between today and tomorrow. What the child can do in cooperation today, the child will be able to do independently tomorrow. This is what ZPD is about.
Okay.
You see, it's not easy to use the concept. Of course, you can say, I use ZPD because ZPD sounds great, fantastic, very easy, scaffolding, blah, blah, blah. But if you take it seriously as a concept, and theoretical concepts are very heavy things, right? You know, we have to be very carefully using them. Otherwise, they might kill us. So you have to identify. We are using ZPD for what? To identify the actual level of development of teachers or students and the potential level of development of teachers and students, and how the level of potential development is gradually becoming their actual development. What are the strategies? What are the ways of transforming these, moving them from their potential level into their actual level? This will be a research about how ZPD works in teachers' practices.
Yeah.
Okay. You see? So then you mentioned scaffolding, very popular conception introduced by Jerome Bruner in late 60s. Am I right? I'm looking at David. Am I right? Yeah, Bruner. Scaffolding.
Yes, that was Bruner.
Yeah, that was Bruner. Okay.
Bruner, Rost, and Wood in 1976.
Yes, absolutely, 1976. Yeah. So, and since being introduced, it becomes very popular. And for many people, scaffolding is nearly the same or almost the same or absolutely the same as zone of proximal development.
No.
But this is absolutely not. First of all, it is not Vygotsky's concept. You read Vygotsky 6 volumes plus 100 different papers and chapters published after, you will never find anything about scaffolding in Vygotsky. Okay, this concept does not belong to cultural historical theory. I know it's a very disappointing news for you, but but that's true.
No, Nikolai, might I just mention that I can accept this notion of the distance between. I can see that as a very sound thing. But where the frustration sets in with me, and I feel others, is there seems to be a reluctance to talk about how you fill the space. And also going back to your, I think, very good analogy of the tree, there seems to be a reluctance to talk about this depends upon the health of the tree and the available nutrient. So there's a lot more that you could bring into the analogy of the tree. That relieves the frustration that some people have about this apparent reluctance to talk about filling the space and the conditions under which the potential development occurs.
No, potential development occurs because the child is involved in social interactions.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's also in sort of real level. So, and Vygotsky distinguishes, said that the child has two real levels, really existing levels at the same time. The level of actual development and the level of potential development. Okay. The potential development is not a future. It exists now, today, because now, today, the child is able to solve the task in cooperation with me. Okay? And tomorrow, he will be able to solve this kind of tasks individually. So this is the point. It's not about. And your idea with supporting the tree to grow, the fertilizer, it moves Vygotsky further to the discussion of the relationship between development and learning. I'm looking at Brendan at the moment, because learning is not a higher psychological function, because higher psychological functions are our individual psychological processes like sensation, perception, memory, thinking. They are our psychological processes. But learning is a form of, if you like, cultural form of behavior. It's a form of interaction of individuals. But through this interaction, the development of higher psychological functions might happen. And learning is a special type, обучение, which in Russian is not only learning, but it's like learning, teaching. It involves two sides. Обучение is not only learning and not only teaching. It's like learning, teaching together. It's a collective activity or system of interactions between the teacher and the child, or between more intelligent child and less intelligent child. System of interaction. This is what learning is. And through this interaction, if this interaction is focused on those functions of the child which are not developed, which are in a bud stage, which activates these buds and support these buds. It's like a fertilizer which supports the flowers to come to life. This is very good learning. Vygotsky says that learning should go ahead development. What does it mean? Learning should go ahead development, which means that learning goes ahead. Learning creates the situation when the development begins, when the social becomes the individual. Learning is a special type of social environment we create, which begins to generate high psychological functions, which creates this first stage first stage of appearing of higher psychological. This is what good learning is. But bad learning is the learning when teacher is teaching the child things the child already can do individually. This is also a learning, but this learning does not create conditions for development of the child. This only gives child more information. This is about what knowledgeable other does. You don't know this, I tell you, now you know. You did not take that, I tell you, now you know. But this is very bad learning, because good learning is going ahead development. It creates the situation, the social situation of development, when the buds are beginning to be converted into the flowers and fruits. This is what good learning is. That's what Vygotsky says, that good learning is the process which awakens the functions which are at the embryonic stage and helps them to grow and to flourish as individual higher psychological functions. This is what good learning is. And this is a relationship between learning and development. For many people, learning and development is the same. For many people, learning and development is separate. And Vygotsky discusses this in Thinking and Speech, chapter 7, I think. But Vygotsky says that they are not the same. They are not absolutely separate. They are in a dialectical relationship. And scaffolding is just the metaphor of scaffolding is just building some metallic or wooden constructions around building house to support. So this is very mechanistic understanding. But think about that. Think about this. Vygotsky gives us a metaphor of a garden, of a tree, flowers, buds, fruits. It's very live, it's very organic, in Hegelian sense, an organic system, which grows and develops. But scaffolding metaphor is very mechanistic, supportive instruments which mechanically support learning, which might be okay, but even if scaffolding is okay, it's not ZPD, because scaffolding is not a distance between two levels. And ZPD is a distance. Thank Judy for starting that. So, you see, as I said, the problem with Vygotsky is that there is no canonic reading. Okay, I agree with Anna. But the problem is that there are lots of canonic misreadings, and misreading of ZPD through scaffolding, more knowledgeable other skills, and this is an example of canonic misreading. And this misreading is repeated so many times in so many books and articles, then people begin to trust this. Instead of looking back, open Vygotsky and read. That's what I want everybody to do before taking the concept into the agenda. So we still have 1 hour time. Now we can make a break, short questions, because I'm not finishing the whole story. It will be a continuation. ZPD is not only related to this. I will continue after the break. Now, any questions? But please, you already mentioned I'm not good in answering questions, so please forgive me. Okay.
Nikolai, I'm wondering that based on what you said, Ishraq research question. It's my understanding that Ishraq research question cannot be answered through cultural historical lens. Can it be?
No. because if the research question is about development of higher psychological functions from the point of view of social origins, or from the point of view of mediation, or from the point of view of the way they are functioning, that's okay. But if your research question is not about developing higher psychological functions or things related to them, why should you use Vygotsky theory? It's like if you want to fly, it's better to take a helicopter rather than a submarine, because submarine is specially designed to float underwater. Vygotsky theory is specially designed theory to study the process of development of higher psychological functions from the point of view of their origins, social environment, good. From the point of view of the tools and science which mediate high psychological functions, good. From the point of view of social interactions, perfect. From the point of view of social situations of development, fantastic. From the point of view of mediation, how the child comes from non-mediated to mediated, and what are the tools the child is trying to use to mediate, okay, all this okay, because all these about cultural historical theory. But if your question is about how scaffolding promotes learning, why should you? Because this is a research question. So it's like to ask, how can I fly? The answer is you can fly using helicopter, you can fly using the aircraft, but please don't use the submarine because it's not for that.
How about, I'm asking about Ishraq, a research question again. How about chat or activity theory? Can be looked at those two?
Welcome. Again, depends on your research question.
No, I mean, like Ishraq research question, which is development of teacher from child-centered approach to more, a teacher-centered to child-centered approach. Can it be answered by?
But why you put the word development here in your research question? Are you sure that transition from teacher-centered approach to child-centered approach is a development? Why
No, I guess
development.
Yeah, I guess I'm using development in general sense, not cultural historical sense.
No. You cannot use development in general sense, because if you are doing a research project, you have to use development in very exact sense.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, Nikolai. I think development can be used in many senses.
In many senses,
He believes in sociogenetic development. He believes in phylogenetic development. You yourself, Nikolai, you're using something Vygotsky would be horrified to hear. You're using tree development and botanical development, which Vygotsky himself uses. So I think the idea that we can be linguistic purists and we can tell Nushin that she must never use development in any other way except the pedagogical sense, and we have to tell poor Ishraq that, I'm very sorry, your research question is not part of cultural historical theory. I think that's just not true. I think that cultural historical theory is extremely powerful. It has the ability to address adult development, but the zone of proximal development is developed in a very specific context to solve a very specific problem. And if you really want to use those words, zone of proximal development, then you have to understand the very specific problem that Vygotsky is addressing. Now, actually, on the chat box, who's studied some defectology, has come up with a really interesting example of this. The kids are able to repeat the correct answers to questions. They repeat them perfectly well. They don't come up with them separately, but they repeat them beautifully. And they repeat the teacher's definitions, and they have perfect definitions of their concepts. But they are not able to generate concepts on their own. They're able to learn one definition after another. They sound beautiful, they pass tests, but they are not able to generate concepts on their own. So I said to Jane, I bet you anything, these are school-age children, because Vygotsky addresses precisely this issue in this book right here, where he's not this book, but our next volume, where he's talking about thinking in school age. the Soviet government has decided that all teachers in the Soviet Union will walk into the elementary school and they'll teach the children concepts like class struggle, revolution, and socialist reconstruction of the economy. Mm-hmm. That's second grade to fourth grade curriculum, elementary school. Guess what? The kids are really good at memorizing the definitions. They're perfectly good at spouting the right answers on tests. And they have no ability whatsoever to really understand the concrete reality behind the concepts. So one of them says, for example, you know, the ruling class, they all live in 12-story skyscrapers and they have electric lights. That's his definition of a ruling class. So you can see the kids have purely verbal, not conceptual, but verbal understandings of the concepts they're supposed to be learning.
No, it's not a verbal understanding, it's just verbal representation.
Exactly.
They are reproducing what they heard. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And
if I can add one,
I'm sorry, Jane?
Sorry, I was just wondering if I could add one more piece to that, if that's possible.
Please.
Some of these, so I also teach high school science, and some of these students, they can explain the understanding the idea, but being able to codify it into mathematical symbols. That is what is missing. So it's not just the exact replication of what we've told them. They have the understanding in there, but they're unable to get that codifying happening to start off with. And that's where I was wondering whether that was the that initial that's the bud. They can get there.
This is the bud, and then you give them the way to explore this bud.
To get it.
Yes.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is about the buds of development, and this is about the tools you give them for them, and then they're able to explain this using the different
type. The other group, which is where David Kellogg was saying that they just replicate it and it's not there. So you have the two that you're balancing between. So thank you for your answers on both. Much appreciated.
Very good. Very good. And then I would recommend you, if you don't know yet, just to look at Davidov's articles in the book, Mathematical Studies. He made a complete curriculum, the program for mathematics for primary schools in Soviet Union, which is translated. His book, The Problem of Generalization in Education, is translated in English and it's available for free in internet.
This would be good.
Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you.
And in Davidov's program, do you remember what was Andy said, that using the measure stick, measuring other things, the children are coming to the idea that they understand the idea, but they have no tools to express. And then teacher suggests the formula. Said, okay, let's make it F, let's make it C, let's make it D, let's make a symbols about that, and introduce the mathematical formulas through this. When they have to understanding, but they have no way to explain, and teacher helps. So which means the teacher gives them the tools, the exact tools. Yes, absolutely. That's what Davidov did, and it's what is now his followers are doing in Moscow in school number 91. And this Davidov experimental school still exists, and there is a group of researchers, former students and PhD students of Davidov, who are now developing this not only for primary school but now for secondary school also, based on the ideas of German cell, based on the ideas of concept, from the idea of ascending from concrete to abstract. All these things are not just theoretical. All these things are converted into practice in the Soviet Union. It was also in Germany, now in Japan, in Finland. So, and
thank you so much
and probably eventually in Australia, but we are in the process. So, okay, we are not discussing just theoretical things. We are discussing things which really gives us a lens. One of my articles is titled "Refocusing Lens on Development." we have to refocus lens from learning, interacting to development. We have to look at learning, how learning supports development. Does it support development or creates an obstacle for development? How interactions might support development, or what kind of interactions they might be. So refocusing lens of development is that the second slogan, if you like, we can use. Okay. Thank you. David, I see you are not arguing with me. You are just clarifying things. Yeah.
No, on the contrary, I was appreciating Jane's comment because I guessed wrongly that she was talking about school-age children who are not high school children. Oh. But she said that actually the kids have the concepts, they can't communicate them. And that reminded me that actually at the end of thinking at school age, what Vygotsky really says is they can't communicate. They lack the language. The concept's there, but they haven't actually been able to label it yet. They haven't been able to master the symbolic forms that you need to actually communicate the concept. So actually, believe it or not, Jane, your recognition, your memory of a chapter you've never read is better than mine, who was translated in 2 different languages.
Yeah, and there is another point here. I want to discuss this. One of the aspects of how Vygotsky used ZPD was the aspect of relations between everyday concepts and scientific concepts. In thinking and speech, everyday concepts, scientific concepts. What is everyday concept? Everyday concept is the concept which child develops, the child creates in order to explain things around him. They are based on their experience. They explain the wind. Why is the wind? Because the trees are waving. That's why. Things like that. Okay. These are everyday concepts. But there are scientific concepts which are coming from the science. I know here there is a lot of science researchers, so scientific concepts is important. And Vygotsky says that the relationship between scientific concepts and everyday concepts is the relationship between actual level of development and potential level of development. Because the children will never be able to develop, to understand the scientific concepts if the scientific concepts are not given at school, in school, from teacher and explained by the teacher. Being alone, without coming to school, the children will never have a system of scientific concepts, like concepts in physics, or math, or biology, or geography. Only through specially organized education, обучение, the transition of child from everyday concept to scientific concept might happen. And Vygotsky speaks about that. I don't want to reproduce the whole book, Thinking and Speech. This is a whole book about how the child moves from everyday concept to scientific concepts. But the point is that they should be buds. When we want fruits, we should have buds. If we don't have buds, we cannot expect any fruits. But what happens nowadays? I know some research of developing scientific concepts in early childhood. They take children at age 3 or age 4, and they are creating some conditions, and they show the data that the children are able to develop scientific concepts. But if I look at the data, what I see in the data, where the children are answering the questions, they are doing exactly what David said. They remember how to answer the question without any understanding, and they reproduce this answer, and the teacher and researcher is happy. Wow, the child understands the concept. But the child is using the child at age 3-4 is having memory as a leading higher psychological functions, which is most intensively developed, and therefore the child is using memory to reproduce the information the teacher requires. it might produce an impression that the child is easily operating with scientific concepts, but that's not. Because at this age, there are not even buds of scientific concepts.
Nikolai, you were just mentioning scientific concepts there as specifically about science. I've read articles, and I just can't remember now who by, that term scientific concepts as more about academic concepts and broader than science specifically.
Yeah, I agree. Scientific concepts might be different. Some people call it a small science or big science. But what I'm saying in general is that we have to be very precise, we have to be very accurate in using scientific concepts as our analytical lens. If we use them properly, we can see things better. But if we are using them improperly, they make things vague rather than clear.
But I mean, one of the major strategies that teachers would have is to look at children's understanding of that everyday concepts and work out ways to actually connect that with culturally decided academic concepts. I mean, that's what teachers, I would say, do. That's one of the main strategies that teachers would use without it being necessarily understanding that that's what they're actually doing. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. I know what you mean. And they do this having no idea about Vygotsky, of course. Many of them do this just because they do. But if we again come back to Vygotsky discusses that the only way to come to scientific concepts is to make an interaction between everyday concepts and scientific concepts. So the children should express their concept, and the teacher presents academic concepts, and they are discussing interaction. What is right, what is wrong here? So it should be based on the child's understanding. And then the teacher, okay, you understand this way. Okay, let's do. So that's what teachers do, and that's what good teachers do. But there are some teachers who don't care about child's everyday concept. They just give, this is a concept, this is that, please remember that. And children remember. They have good memory, and that's it. But it has no relation to the development of concepts, because children are not able to think the concepts. But concept is a unit of thinking, and a system of actions. And Andy said this today, and that's absolutely true. And even more, Vygotsky says that if the child has only one scientific concept, it means nothing. Scientific concept does not exist in vacuum. It always should be a system of concepts, interrelated concepts. Exactly what we are doing today with Vygotsky's theory. I'm trying to present theory as a system of concepts.
Nikolai, just there's a question in the chat box from Shiyama about the link between ZPD and metacognition. Would you like to comment on that?
And what is metacognition? Because there are different understandings and definitions of metacognition.
Shiyama, are you able to unmute? I mean, I know your camera's not working, but...
Yeah, at least. Because I'm afraid I misinterpret your question, which I don't want to.
May not even be her microphone won't be working as well.
Oh, we can come to this later. So, but this is not the whole story. Believe me or not, it's not the whole story. Okay. So you see, we started from ZPD, and we came to at least 2 laws of development, several concepts, including social environment as a source of development, social situation of development, higher psychological functions. So this is okay. But there is one interesting aspect of ZPD as a concept, is that the child, the task the child is not able to solve independently. Do you remember? This is the way how we identify the level of potential development of intellect. We just give the task to the child, and child tries to solve the task, but he cannot. So, how it might happen? I give the task, child tries, and then says, I cannot, and disappears. So, should I think about how to support the child to solve the task? No, no way, because child is not interested in the task. No way. But what also might happen? I might give the child the task, and the child tries to solve the task, and the child feels that he cannot solve the task, but he tries and tries and tries, being involved, and he has a kind of dramatic collision. Why I cannot? So why it doesn't work? Are these two situations equal? No. The first situation is that the child tries and then gives up, and the second is the child is still trying. Mm-hmm. How can I change this situation? How can I make this situation in my laboratory to make it to make an analysis? I can organize the play, the role play or scenario with the children, and in this scenario they have to go to do something, and there is a task sent by the wizard. Otherwise they will not get to the treasures they are trying for. Okay, so I allocate the task into the situation of play. When they all are involved, they're playing, they have to find the treasure, and there is a task, and they try to solve, but they cannot. So, but they want to try the task. So they're experiencing the great need. They have a motivation to solve the task. Of course, I have created this situation specially because I have located this poor intellectual task into the context when the child cannot come out because otherwise the play will be destroyed. So, and this relates ZPD to another important concept, which is the concept of drama. The concept of drama. The child tries to solve the task, he cannot solve the task, he feels as a kind of dramatic event, and then the teacher or a wizard or somebody or no one comes and gives a kind of hint, a way, shows the way, gives an example, and the child solves the tasks first together with the wizard, and then when the next task comes from the wizard, the child says, okay, I know how to do this. So this is very important concept. It's not about intellectual tasks only. It's about the child, whole child, a holistic view of child. The child is involved not only intellectually, but also involved emotionally. The child understands this as a task he should solve. Not just an intellectual task given, like 3 apples and 3 apples, how many apples? No, it's not about that. So if the child accepts this as a task and the child is trying to find the ways how to solve the task, this is very important aspect of ZPD, which is quite often missed from the secondary or second-hand Vygotsky's writers. And this is very important. This is very important. And because this is a drama and social situation of development when the task should be solved, but we don't know how, okay? This is a specific social situation of development. It is also related to переживание. Because переживание is, I am now quoting Vygotsky, переживание is how the child perceives, accepts, understands, and becoming aware of certain situation. If I really want to organize the conditions for the child to create a zone of proximal development, I want to think about in which form I will present this task to the child. to make sure that the child accepts this as the task, not given to him, but as his task he needs to solve. And experience this as a drama and begins to reflect this task through his own individual переживания. This very situation where the task is the center. If we forget this aspect of child's emotions, child's individual understanding, thinking, individual involvement, if we just put, oh, this is kind of intellectual tasks, binaire, also so on. So it's not about ZPD. ZPD is when the task is in the center of specially created social, micro-social situations of development, when the child is taking it as a challenge with a high motivation and tries, and then he has a kind of negative переживание that I cannot, and then together with others and the teacher, he finally finds the answer. It's a kind of adventure for him. I'm looking at Andy. This is a kind of adventure, but not переживание is adventure. The whole situation is an adventure for him. And his переживание of this situation is very important individual reflection of that. So this is an important personal, if you like, personal individual aspect of ZPD. And this is also related to the levels of development, because ZPD is still a distance, not a difference, not a distinction, not a territory, not a field, but the distance between level of actual development and level of potential development of the child, which opens the door to the child developed or developing higher psychological function, which might be thinking, might be memory, might be will, might be attention, because ZPD exists not only for thinking. ZPD also exists for every higher psychological function. Unfortunately, Vygotsky didn't make a research about how ZPD works for other functions, but he says that the same is applicable to other high psychological functions. And he says that this in, I think it's a problem of age somewhere. Okay, so you see, I'm coming back to my point. Deep understanding, generative understanding. We take one concept of ZPD. Okay, we took it, and we don't follow the interpretations, like say, oh, ZPD, it's about how more knowledgeable other supports, and that's it. No. Say, okay, let's take it as a strategical concept, and let's locate this into the theory, and then, what is the nearest concept it is related? It is related to the concept of development, because zone of proximal development is about development. Zone of proximal development is about development. Zone of proximal development is not about learning, but because it is not a zone of proximal learning, it is a zone of proximal development. Okay, what is development? Development, according to cultural historical theory, development is how the social becomes the individual. This is what development is. Therefore, ZPD is also about how the social becomes the individual. Okay, then ZPD is a distance between two levels. One level is individual and the second is social. Level of actual development is absolutely individual. Level of potential development is absolutely social. Okay, how the social becomes the individual means that what was social, what is social today, tomorrow will be individual. What is on the child potential level today will be in the child actual level tomorrow. Why? Because every high psychological function appears on the stage twice. First on the social plan, and then on the individual. And this is in relation to the law of development.
Nikolai, could I jump in there?
Of course.
So we can debate this more tomorrow as well, because I want to talk about this during our session where yourself and John and Judy will be there. But that very passage you've just alluded to in Vygotsky, Mind in Society, page 57, where it talks about every function appearing twice, first on the social and then individual.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes on to say, this applies equally to voluntary attention and logical memory, which are two of the highest psychological functions you've mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't finish there. He says, and to the formation of concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So I find it hard to see how the formation of concepts doesn't involve learning.
Yeah. I'm great, Brendan. But do you know what? With all my respect, please don't quote Mind in Society here, because it's not a book written by Vygotsky. I said in my presentation yesterday that Mind in Society was the combination, the cocktail of different fragments of Vygotsky's writing, never published before, collected by Michael Cole to introduce Vygotsky to the West.
Okay,
we have 6 volumes, and in 6 volumes, you will see a different formulation of this, formulation in the form of the law, or even several formulations. These from 6 volumes, I'm okay to discuss, but I'm not okay to discuss this fragmented, abridged, censored, reinterpreted, rewritten text presented in the Mind Society. No, sorry, I cannot read second-hand Vygotsky. I have a treasure, 6 volumes. Why should I use the second-hand? I'm sorry. You love the book. You love the book, and I agree. I completely agree. That's a fantastic, but it's not my book. Sorry, I cannot comment.
Okay, fair enough.
So the formation of concepts in the discussion chat, we've been having little discussions about, the velocity, and then a whole system of concepts like velocity, acceleration, momentum. David has said this is development. So is this something, that kind of development of concepts, is that what we're talking about as, is this part of logical thinking when we're talking about these kinds of some concepts, or is this development of concepts? Can we talk about that as a higher psychological function?
Yes.
Clarification.
And Judy, as I said, Vygotsky in Thinking and Speech, Brendan, this is volume 1, little bit bigger than Mind in Society, but worth to read. Volume 1, Vygotsky says that the relationship between academic concepts or scientific concepts and everyday concepts is exactly the relation between level of potential development and level of actual development. So the idea of ZPD is applicable to the concept formation, because concept formation is the way of development of thinking as a higher psychological function. So the higher psychological function, thinking as a higher psychological function, develops from everyday concepts into the scientific concepts. So, well, and this is not the whole story. As I still have 20 minutes, I want to come back to Julius. It was, oh, somebody disappeared. It was maybe Andrea, the teacher of mathematics. She said, what was here?
Valerie had to leave.
Valerie, yeah. And I'm
David's left as well.
Okay, who?
Paul. Sorry, Paul had to leave.
David is here.
Sorry.
I cannot imagine David disappeared. No. Okay.
With us forever, yes.
So
thank goodness.
Okay, there is one more aspect of ZPD, and this aspect of ZPD, which I wrote something many years ago, is hidden dimension of ZPD. You can find my paper called ZPD Hidden Dimension. Hidden dimension, what I mean by hidden dimension is that the child can solve intellectual task, but the child can solve intellectual task incorrectly, not because he does not understand the task, because he takes the task too personally. I can give you an example. So you ask the task, you have 2 apples. Then you give 1 apple to somebody. How many apples you will have? The child says, 2. Huh, teacher said. The child does not understand that having 2 apples, giving 1 apple to somebody, he will have only 1 apple. This is probably the zone of his proximal development. We have to work with the child to teach him that 2 minus 1 is 1, because the child cannot solve this simple problem individually, right? The child needs to support this, okay? But then another teacher says, okay, you have 2 apples. You give 1 apple to someone. How many apples you will have? 2. And the question is, why? Because I never give my apples to anyone. What does it mean? It means the child, of course, understands that when he gives an apple to somebody, he will have only 1. And that is why he is not giving apples to anyone. He wants to have 2 apples instead of 1. You see? So, and it means that the child actual level, this is not his potential, this is actual level. This is what we discovered when we studied play, how play creates a zone of proximal development. You can this paper is free to download. Go to Academia Edu or ResearchGate, you find it there. It's one of my quoted papers, by the way. So the ZPD hidden dimension. So what do I mean by hidden dimension? Is that even though we are doing intellectual tasks or memory tasks, you should not forget that the child is not only his memory, that the child is not only his intellect, that the child is not only his attention. Yeah? That the child is the child, You are dealing with the child, but not with his memory. Okay, so don't forget about possible hidden dimension. That's why play is very good settings, very good form of interaction to study the child development, because in play, the children demonstrates who they are. Even they're playing roles. It's a very, very strongly articulated personal dimension in play activity. So, and finally, to Valerie, we cannot speak seriously about zone of proximal development if we forget the idea of signs and tools, because higher psychological functions are mediated by signs and tools by definition. One of the aspects of building or creating a zone of proximal development for the child is just giving an example of solving the task or solving the task together, but how? What are these instructions? What are these examples? These examples should include certain tools, cultural tools the child used together with you in order to be able to solve the task. Remember what happened today with you? The task was to remember how many digits are after the comma in pi. That was the task. And then what I gave to you? I gave to you 2 cultural tools you can use to solve this task. And I created a social situation of development, and I have created a little bit of zone of proximal development for you. Even though you are very, very well developed people already in terms of memory and thinking and will and emotions, much more developed than me, but I just shared with you my ways of remembering things using cultural tools. So this is one of the interesting aspects of zone of proximal development, which is not well articulated, which for me is a very interesting area of research. And if somebody is interested to do this research, like what is the role of the cultural tools in creating the zone of proximal development for any kind of children or teachers or adults or whatever, it might be very interesting new dimension of of research in a zone of proximal development. Instead of repeating these old stories about more knowledgeable peers or knowledgeable others or the scaffolding. So just to do something which is really interesting, because Vygotsky did not make a clearly articulated research about that. This is the area, which is the field, which will help us to connect zone of proximal development with the social origins and with the second aspect of higher psychological functions. The second aspect is that all higher psychological functions are mediated. So, and the story will continue. And you will continue my story by saying that, hey, Nikolai, ZPD is not only related to social origins of higher psychological functions, it is also related to the mediated character of higher psychological functions. And this is my research about that. And this research will be absolutely amazing contribution to the theory. It will be a new step in developing Vygotsky's theory, being stood clearly on the shoulders of the giant and looking a little bit farther than the giant is. So I would love to invite, if anyone is interested to do this, we can discuss, we can make a research proposal or whatever. Well, that's what I wanted to tell you. And you see, it was your concept. You suggested the concept. But,
hang on, Nikolai. There's one concept you didn't manage to fit in. And that's, there's one concept you didn't manage to fit in. You said you were going to fit in all the concepts. And the number 2 concept was perezhvania. And
I did.
He did mention it.
Yeah, I did. That ZPD is related with drama, and drama is related with perezhvania and social situation of development. I did.
That was the only mention.
Huh?
That was the only mention.
Yeah.
Can I have another stab at it before we quit?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I want to link it to Shyama's question about metacognition.
Mm-hmm.
And what Vygotsky says about perezhvania is that it is not simply the experience of a drama or the experience of a conflict. It is the folding back of an experience upon itself. That is to say, it is the processing of the meaning of the experience. And for that reason, perezhvania seems to me to be present throughout development. It is like another aspect I'm going to talk about tomorrow, which is emotion. Emotion is present at every stage of development, except that by the time you get to development and look back at the beginning of it, what was an emotion has been completely transformed.
Yeah,
and I think we
absolutely.
can say exactly the same thing about perezhvania.
Absolutely.
And this is one of the very difficult things, that it's not just that we're trying to fix the theory in stable meanings, and like words like development, for example, and say that Vygotsky meant X and not Y. But in fact, Vygotsky uses terms that themselves develop. They mean different things at different stages of development.
Yeah.
So the perezhvania of the infant drinking milk at the mother's breast is one thing.
Yes.
The perezhvania of the teenager thinking over his or her first sexual experience is something very different.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning this. So perezhvania, well, I don't want to reproduce everything I have written about perezhvania. If you are interested in what I think about perezhvania, the list of my readings is available. But what I want to say is that as we established, zone of proximal development as a concept is connected directly to the general genetic law, which says that every higher psychological function appears on the stage twice, first as a social, then social plane, then individual plane. And you know this by heart. Everybody who knows Vygotsky can just reproduce this law from memory, doing the same as children do without understanding, just reproducing from it. Okay. However, if we look at this formulation, what does it mean? Appears on the stage twice. First, it appears on the social plane of the stage, and then appears again in the individual plane of the stage. Does it mean that it first appears, then disappears, and then appears again individually? And what happens between this? Because Vygotsky says, appears on the stage twice. First, it appears on a social plane, interpsychologically, then it appears. How can we understand this appearance and disappearance and appearance again? It's a magic here, it's a mystic. Any ideas? Any ideas?
My idea is that the world is a stage, and that Vygotsky is thinking of planes on a stage. There's
on one stage, yeah.
And there's a proscenium, and there's the mid stage.
Yeah, proscenium, the mid stage, and the backstage. Yes, and I'm looking at Brandon. Brandon, your quotation from this law from Mind in Society doesn't say about appears on the stage twice. But the stage is important for Vygotsky because this is the stage of life. Every function, it's a drama. It's Shakespeare. It's Hamlet. It's like a very theatrical. Okay, but if you take Mind in Society, you don't find anything about stage, and even nothing about two plans of the stage, because your translation says it appears on two levels. Okay, but the levels are levels of my beautiful house, but not two plans of the same theatrical stage when dramatic collision of your life unfolds. Okay, so are you convinced enough to stop reading Mind in Society? Okay, okay, and Vygotsky, using tone переживания, Vygotsky clarifies. It does not disappear. It appears first and then being refracted through переживание, it appears at the second time. Every higher psychological function appears on the social plane of the stage and then being refracted individually, each time individually, through the prism of child's переживание. And переживание is not only emotion. Переживание includes interpretation, understanding, conscious awareness, perception, and memory, and will, and imagination, and emotions. This is complex. So it becomes the individual. Because Vygotsky says, переживание is a concept. I'm now quoting, directly quoting, not from Mind in Society. I'm quoting from different source. Переживание is a concept which allows us to understand the role and influence of environment on the course of the child development. Переживание is a concept which allows us to understand the role and influence of the social environment on the course of the child development. The moments of environment, the aspects of environment, which are not refracted through child's переживание, they do not have any effect on the child. They exist objectively as factors. But if they are not refracted through the child's переживание, they are never becoming the child's individual higher psychological functions. Only those moments of environment which are refracted through the prism of the child переживание becomes the factors of development. That's what Vygotsky says. So that's why when we create a zone of proximal development for the child, we have to be careful about personal dimension. We have to be careful about dramatic moments when the child takes this task not as just a poor intellectually gymnastics, but as a task he needs to solve, because this is a task of death and life or something like that, full of emotion, being refracted through his individual prism of переживание. Only through this, potential becomes actual. Only through this, social becomes individual, or does not. There is no guarantee, of course, But without переживание, there is no way, there is no chance. Absolutely no way. So, and this moves us to understand Vygotsky not as a poor social determinist, saying that everything depends on environment. Environment is the child. No, nothing about. Because environment, moments of environment should be reflected through by the child own переживание. And the child is somebody who is making social situation, a social situation of development. This is the child who is making ZPD a ZPD, because if it's not reflected through his переживание, it's nothing. It's just a surrounding. Even though the conditions are the best, if the child is not reflecting them through his own emotional, personal, intellectual prism, nothing happens. Social is not directly determines the child. No, it should, child is, and Vygotsky writes, the переживание makes social situation a social situation of development. That's a direct quotation from Vygotsky. And sorry, David, for forcing me to speak more about переживание. I'm very grateful, but I honestly didn't want, because I know you are in the program tomorrow with you, and I was expecting you do this. But thank you for sharing. I'm taking your job. You are very generous, I know, as always.
Not at all.
Okay.
No, you spoke very well, and not things I would have said.
Wow, really? Oh, it seems to me that I also did my job well. Okay. Okay, so you see, it was a journey from one concept in order to make sure that we do understand this concept. What required is to establish the relations of this concept with all other concepts. Exactly as Vygotsky said, concepts do not exist in separation. Concepts always exist as a system of concepts. So, understanding of the theory as a system of concepts means that we have to answer two questions. If you take a concept, question number one is how this concept is related to the subject matter of cultural historical theory, which is the process of development of higher psychological functions. We have to find the answer to this question. And the second is how this concept is connected and related with other concepts and laws. Once we have answer to these questions, we have a hope that we have a deep understanding of this particular concept as our analytical tool. That's what I wanted to convince you about. I know I did it perfectly bad, and your lecturer was terrible, but the audience was fantastic. Thank you very much for being patient. Thank you very much for just following what I was saying to you. Thank you very much. That's it.
Nikolai, before you go.
No, I don't go.
Before you finish, you're talking about a project that you ask people to potentially engage with you on. Could you explain that again, please?
Well, what I said is that ZPD as a concept is definitely related to the idea of social origins of higher psychological functions, yeah? Because it speaks about how social becomes the individual, all these things. But what is not discovered is how concept of ZPD is related to the second characteristic of every higher psychological function. And a second characteristic is that every higher psychological function is mediated by the construction. And there is no research about how in the zone of proximal development the child moves from non-mediated to mediated higher psychological functions. how this mediation happens. What is the process of the functions becoming mediated? They were not mediated, now becoming mediated. What are those mediators and how this is involved in the ZPD? Because this is also an aspect of ZPD. Yeah? So, and this is my theoretical idea, and as it is not discovered, there is no research about that. If we make a research about that, it might be a very interesting contribution to the whole idea of ZPD, to the cultural historical theory, because Vygotsky did not do this. So, and yeah, we can do. So this is just a general idea. I don't know how to conceptualize this. Maybe we have to have a meeting. But if somebody is interested, I'm ready to start discussion about certain research, to do certain research about that. It's just a kind of general idea, proposal. Okay, this is a territory nobody made a research in.
But you're a person who knows enough about all this and have read about it that knows where the gaps are.
Sorry?
You are read very well in this area, so you know where the gaps are more than any of the rest of them.
Oh yeah, probably yes, but I'm okay to share these gaps, and I need a co-authorship. Coming back to Anna's presentation today, so okay, thank you. If you are interested, okay. Judith, you know my email, you know my phone. Okay,
Okay, thanks very much, Nick.
You are welcome. Yeah.
Yeah,
and sorry for disappointing some of you. Sorry, I didn't make it intentionally. I'm just, I love everybody, as you know. And if I said something,
you managed to include everything.
Yeah, absolutely. If I said something wrong, just don't take it personal. By the way, no, it's not about that. Okay. So, any other questions, commentaries? I don't know how it was. Are you happy? Are you satisfied?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's good.
No, I think people are very happy.
Because
everybody
see,
ready for a break?
I see puzzling faces like, what?
Okay, I mean, we haven't heard the last of Nikolai anyway. We get him back tomorrow morning, to really finish things off and cap everything. With some illustrations of the research, which is going to be really great.
Yeah.